Larson is the man.
Kyle Larson's performance at Bristol added momentum to his playoff run, but for others, costly penalties signaled the end of the line.
Just got popped speeding.
Son of a sorry guys.
Welcome to a new episode of NASCAR Inside the Race, presented by Consumer Cellular. I'm Drew Blickensderfer, crew chief of the 10, joined by Travis Peterson, crew chief of the 34. Well, Bristol, the end of the chaos round. We knew there was probably tire issues in the spring. We didn't know what to expect this time. We had some guys sliding up, some guys going back. We had decent nights. What do you think, Travis?
Yeah, you know, honestly, we talked about the chaos round for the last several, and it's lived up to it, but this night was anything but that. We didn't see the tire wear. We didn't have very many cautions at all. There was pretty much a very straightforward race dominated by a playoff guy, and you got what you got.
Yeah, at the end of the night, I think the most important thing, the standings. Who advanced, who didn't. We can go in to look at that right here. We saw at the end of the night, Chase Briscoe had a fabulous evening, moved up. Some guys dropped below the line that we probably didn't expect. Kyle Larson wins, like you said. Joey Logano already had that win. There was some movement here, but that cut line all night long. We saw it on the broadcast. People were paying attention to it. You know, it was kind of fluctuating throughout the evening.
Yeah, I don't know about you. There was lulls in the race where we weren't catching the next guy, and the guy behind had a buffer to us. So I would be looking up and seeing, oh man, there's somebody in by 4, and I kind of let Michael know a couple times. You know, hey, you're catching Ty, and he's in by 4 right now. We're out by 4 or whatever. And definitely was surprised to see some of this change. Obviously, in particular, this group of guys that we talked about last week had great first Bristols, and it really didn't work out for them. You know, Brad just had a very uncharacteristically bad night, and then we're going to break down Ty and Martin, what happened to them. So early on, right here, these guys are both having great top 10 days, doing everything they need to. They're expected to get stage points throughout the evening, and I think that's part of why Ty was so close at different points in the race, even though he was having to come from behind. Obviously, Martin had a decent overall night, but you see the huge drops, particularly early on with the 54 and then late with the 19, and just no recovery because there was so little passing.
Yeah, you said the huge drops. You see Ty does it early in the race. He's able to kind of take his good car and get back here, at least give himself a shot, where Martin, late in the race, he drops, and once he drops, wow, just stays right there. It gets lapped early in that run, can't pass a soul, and that's kind of the theme we saw at Bristol. We didn't expect that, the tires to last that long. It was a track position race, and once he lost it going into the third stage, it was really hard to try to overcome that. Yeah,
unfortunate situations for both of those guys. You know, I think we need to look at what it is that created both problems for these guys.
This is the timing lines that NASCAR gives the teams well in advance of the race, so we know when we're picking pit stalls and we're setting dashes and letting the drivers know how to come on and off pit road, what segments are and what you need to do.
Yeah, so I think it's important for everybody to understand, because Bristol's a unique one. Usually we have a pretty straight line pit road, and we got to go around. So this is the entry, and under yellow and green it's different. We only had yellow, so that doesn't really matter. But this is kind of the path we take. What's unique about certain pit roads, and this one in particular, is when you get these tight curves, and any pit road, but the straight sections don't matter, NASCAR's measuring right on the outside edge of the pit boxes. So they're measuring the bottom, and so they kind of carry that line through the corner like this. But the yellow line is where the cars are running, outside wider. So any curved segment, we can increase speed, and you still go based on a time between the two timing lines, which are these red markers on here. So what we're going to see is the fact that where you run on pit road through a curve and how you carry your corner speed is what created both the problems for both of these guys.
When you get your pit road speeds, you want your driver to be very accurate and run the exact same arc he's going to during the race, or you could have a problem. And I think that's probably what we're going to get to here when we look at Ty Gibbs.
What we have here is SMT again, and the blue one is his penalty stop, and the orange one is one after. It's hard to know what he would have done without a penalty, because obviously as soon as you get a penalty in a zone, you're going to back it down.
Yep.
But in Ty's case, it was the first zone after he left. He was pitted at the end of the backstretch. He launches straight into the curve, and that first section is curved. So one of the things that's good about that pit selection is you come in with straight lights and you launch out of your box and go to your curve immediately. You don't have to kind of manage it up and down throughout pit road. He's doing that, but he gets a great launch. I mean, you can see the blue line here. This is his mile per hour by SMT, and this is his RPM. You get these spikes of wheel spin right in this range, But then he's got a lot of RPM right after, a lot of speed. He gets a great launch out of his box, goes straight into that curve section, and I think he goes right up to his curve lights or whatever it is. He gets too much, and he speeds in that zone right there by a little bit.
Yeah, I think probably when he's coming down pit road before the race to check his lights, he's making an arc like you see this red car doing. It's way out here making the arc. Ty's shortcutting it because of where his stall is. He's leaving straight. And like you said, that's a pie-shaped area. They measure around the inside. If his lights are set for the outside, he's basically shortcutting that section, which caused the speeding penalty.
Let's jump right back to that pit road timing lines just to kind of highlight that area one more time for everybody. So Ty was in 24. He comes out right into this pie that we're talking about, and that's what created the issue for him.
Here's his in-car camera, and we can see him going straight. And you'll see cars, when we play this, you'll see cars that are making the natural arc, and he gets to cut them a little bit, and that's part of the speeding.
Yeah, so to your point, he leaves right out of there. It was the 5 car who had the first one, so he was the second one in. But right there, you can see when he comes out, he goes straight out of his box, straight into the curve. And this point right here, that yellow line is the pit out indicator. That is what ends that final segment. So if we were to draw this on the track, the start of that pie is that red line, and the yellow line that's painted on there is the usual pit out under a green flag situation, and it's just the end of the timing zone here. But he's 3 or 4 car lengths lower than the 14. He goes down here around this line that we're talking about. This is that line that NASCAR measures them at, and when the cars are out wide, they can go faster. Unfortunately, he couldn't go faster running as low as he did.
Yeah, unfortunate for the 54. Also the 19 we talked about. We can go back and look at some of the 19's issue. He was in a different section. When we talked about where Ty was in this section right in here. Martin was in this section right here because of him pitting on the front stretch pit road when he came around. And we went back and looked at some data. And when we looked at that data, we were able to see probably what happened with the 19.
Yeah, so honestly, a very similar situation, but inverted.
Yeah.
So you go up to that curve speed through the curve, you run it on the outside. And when you get back to the straight section, you have to give it back. So the timing of when your spotter tells you or when you create a mental marker to back down your speed is super crucial for not maximizing the curve speed, but not overdoing it in the straight. And what happens for him is he overdoes it in the straight. Right here again, we have blue line is his penalty, and orange line is a non-penalty pit stop, the one before for Truex's case. And you can see right here the mile per hour and RPM are carried too long.
Yeah, when Martin gets to this area right in here, the blue continues too long, just like you said. And you can see it clear as day in the data. Either the spotter gave him a wrong mark, Martin wasn't paying attention to his mark exactly like he was the time before, and there's a lot of things that are going on to this. Your engineers during the week are setting your dash to make sure your lights are the way the driver wants them, and then you relay that information to a spotter who's standing up high in turn 1 looking down, and he's given Martin a reference, back it down to this many lights, something like 5 red, where he ran 7 or 8 red in the corner. So he's backing it down at a certain mark. He either missed his mark or didn't pay attention to that mark and carried the RPM too far into that straightaway and got busted by just a little bit.
Yeah, I believe it was 0.09, so he was definitely playing with it. I look back at the speeds of some of his earlier runs. In the orange one, for example, and his other ones, he's not all that close. So definitely just a little bit too far. And we highlight the RPM because I don't know if everybody knows this, but we don't have speedometers in these cars like a normal car. We only go off of an RPM and how that lights up our dash with, bubbled indicators.
That's right.
So we don't have, hey, I'm running 39 mile an hour, everything's okay, and we are all pushing it, right? There's a second or two to be gained from running what the pit road speed is to the 5 mile an hour buffer they give us. So you're trying to get all you can, got a little bit too much.
But tire wear, it was for sure the issue in the spring. Mysteriously, we didn't have it on Friday or Saturday night. Completely different race than I think a lot of us were expecting. We'll get into that next.
The NASCAR playoffs are here, and every week we break down the road to the title. The favorites, the underdogs, and those on the outside looking in. Don't be on the outside, be on the inside. It's NASCAR Inside the Playoffs on True TV and Max.
Bristol in the spring, super chaotic with tires wearing out in 40 or 50 laps. I think a lot of us were expecting it this time. We didn't see that at all. I think we should probably dive into what might have changed, whether weather-wise or track surface.
Yeah, I think it was unknown going into the weekend, right? Nobody had any idea if it was going to be just like the spring. I know the test, they saw some similar tire wear. bringing back everything exactly the same. I don't think anybody knew, and I don't know what your choices were going into it, but do we try to bias for that first one, or do we go back thinking it's going to be like last fall race?
Yeah, I think like last fall race is what we're used to, and then in the spring it threw a hiccup for us, but you can see some still pictures of when we started practice this time on Friday. We had 45 minutes straight practice. The track is tremendously darker than it was in the spring. In the spring, we just had the trucks there. We didn't have Xfinity cars, so another series practicing right before our practice. Not only that, having the truck race the night before. This one on the left, really clean. Like there's nothing on the racetrack hardly. Maybe a little rubber at the bottom. There's some darkness at the top, but not much. But the one close to you, Travis, it looks like cars have been all over that racetrack.
You know, for a while we had the dirt race in the spring, but back when we had a spring fall, you would always see the track rubber in and the groove change a little faster for the Cup cars by the end of the weekend with multiple series there. We just didn't expect that spring race to stay clean the whole time and to ball up and have the issues we had where the tires just disintegrated. You can see the fall, it was very clearly going to go right back to the old Bristol where the track took the rubber, the top groove rubbered in, everything was the same quintessential. We just all found out together at the same moment.
Track temperature means something, but UV means a lot as well. The more the sun beats on that racetrack, that helps lay rubber. So the tire for the truck, the tire for the Xfinity car for sure added a lot more rubber this time than it did in the spring, which ultimately led to us going out and practice. You wouldn't dare run the top in practice in the spring because there were so many marbles. We right away went right to the top, and cars were making speed up there.
Yeah, this is when we knew, right? We could see the track. We didn't know how it was going to go. But the moment people started going to the top early and running the same pace as the bottom, that's almost never been the case, regardless of the race of the year in history. It takes till you get somewhat into the first stage or after that Xfinity race for the top to truly be rubbered up enough to matter. And right away, the whole field's out there. Everybody's top, bottom, middle, just going wherever, running the same pace. I think at that moment, everybody went, okay, no longer going to be a tire wear race.
And you can see it again. Like we talked about earlier, that top groove has a ton of rubber in it. It's got a lot of rubber down here at the bottom. It's got a decent amount of rubber. You see this car back here running the middle. There's cars all over the racetrack, and there's not the marbles that keep you from being able to go up top. It's nice and clean up there. It's a completely different practice than we had in the spring, and I think all of us in about the middle of practice thought, okay, this is going to be like what last fall was.
And I think you mentioned you went out there and you went and you said, okay, somebody else has made it a little farther, so I can go now. And there were cars that sat on pit road at the beginning of practice to kind of maybe wait and see. I knew I just want to go out there and run until the way the first spring race went. It would fall off, it would go to cords, you wouldn't crash. So I basically told Michael, well, we're just going to go run until you either feel an issue or we figure out what's going on, and we just kept running, and nothing changed. So I think part of that is what led to the things we're going to see that they changed overnight again, because they were worried that, oh, now it's just going to be a top dominant race.
Yeah, by the end of practice, almost everybody is running the top. If you run the top, it's really hard to have anybody pass you from underneath. And in this video here, what we'll see is what we talked about early, Travis. They decided to play PJ1 on Saturday before the race to try to get that bottom groove to come in so that we could have 2 lanes and have more passing for the event.
Yeah, so I think there's a little bit to talk about there, right? They sprayed resin on a larger chunk of the bottom groove, or maybe even the whole track. I don't even remember, honestly. But resin was new in the spring, and they thought, oh, could that have been the problem with the tires? They went back and tested. It was similar but not as bad. They're going to stick with the resin. We think the resin's better for potentially wet weather scenarios or whatever it may be, because the PJ is just a different compound. They've had issues with the PJ at different tracks, so the resin's kind of become the dominant thing. But what happened was they saw it going that way. They saw the Xfinity race become top dominant, and they said, if the bottom groove doesn't come in at all, we're going to have this train around the top. Nothing fun's going to happen. So let's spray the bottom 2 feet. And so the reason we stopped this image right here, you can see this dark chunk. This is the area of the track they sprayed. They come spray the PJ. It's going to take a couple laps to activate, but then it's going to give all that grip to your left side tires, make the bottom more of an option to go down there and pass a guy, maybe run the same pace as the top where the drivers have options.
Yeah, I think it helped. You know, during the race, you could see the guys run the bottom and at least run the same speed at the top. Couldn't run faster. I think everybody ran similar speed, so there wasn't a ton of passing. But the bottom, it wasn't terrible on restarts. The top wasn't dominant all night long. There were options that people could go to, at least to run side by side. It was very hard to complete a pass, and we talked about that earlier, how when Truex went to the back, he just got stuck. But it gave options for people to on restarts, and early in the race, the PJ1 was working, and people wanted to be at the bottom of the racetrack. This is the end of the Xfinity race on the left and the start of our race on the right. The other thing NASCAR did, not only sprayed PJ1 at the bottom like we talked about, they tried to scrape some of the rubber off the top to make it less dominant. And it semi-worked, I think. People didn't want to go up there right away. Our cars naturally kind of pull up rubber as we drive around under caution. So that's some of the cleaning that happened there. But scraping the top, spraying the bottom, trying to make more side-by-side racing.
Yeah, I think if we just focus, I'm going to square it off on both. Just the top part. This is what we're talking about. You can see almost like what we showed earlier for how the spring to fall track looked. When they scraped it up, that's kind of what it looks like after the Xfinity race. And usually they don't do too much between the races. So our race would have started with that much rubber on the track. And like you said, they were trying to make it have 2 lanes. And I think they did. I mean, there was multiple times throughout the race that I would tell my spotter, hey, tell him that last lap was good. He ran top. Oh, he ran bottom this time. He ran go back down there. It was just the same thing. It was whatever rhythm he was happy in. So it was super even. I think the lanes were great. I think the track prep was great. We just don't really know what changed that made the tires not do what they did in the spring, or what it is that made the spring do that when historically we've seen more races like this.
So the chaos round is over. We are now on to the round of 12. There was plenty of challenges that they faced in this chaos round, these first 3 races, but there's plenty in the next round as well. We'll dive into that next.
Hey race fans, Corey LaJoy here. Join Ryan Flores and myself for Stacking Pennies each week. I'll break down my race and explain what happened right out of my windshield.
Plus, we award the Dogs of the Week for the best pit crews and go in-depth on all the money stops, pit road mistakes, and penalties.
And we've got a ton of guests. We have SVG stopping by. We had Ricky Stenhouse after he punched Kyle Busch in the face. We've had Bubba. We've had all sorts of guys in here in the Nonsense Garage, so you do not want to miss it. Check us out on Sirius XM Channel 90, YouTube, or wherever you find your podcast. Each and every week, Stack of Pennies. That's what's up.
I'm Ryan Flores. Join Kim Kuhn and myself each and every week right here at Around the Track. Whether you are going to the racetrack or watching from home, we get you ready for all things national and regional level.
And we'll tell you who and what to watch for each week. Plus, we get you ready for the weekend at the racetrack, and Erica will help you place your bets to win some easy money.
Be sure to check out Around the Track every Wednesday on NASCAR's YouTube channel.
All right, Travis, 4 drivers were eliminated after Bristol. 12 remain. Let's look at the field going into Kansas, the round of 12 here.
Yeah, we had this graphic up earlier. This is the guys that are in and out. This is where they ended in their point totals. Obviously, we saw tie fade a little bit at the end. That number was really close for a while. So I think the key thing is we talked about how there's a couple guys we didn't expect to get out. The question is going to be how this resets, because you got a guy like Cindric who ends this round 36 to the good because he had such a great round, but now he's 4 out.
Yeah, you see Joey Logano feeling good after that win at Atlanta. He's back to only +4. You know, you've got guys like Austin Cindric and Daniel Suarez who had great first rounds, the first 2 races for sure, that are now under the cut line. Chase Briscoe squeaked his way in with a great run at Watkins Glen and Bristol, now back to -7. And old Denny Hamlin here. We talked about how many points he scored early, and he's been out for a while. Denny is only +7 going into the next round.
It's amazing to me how tight all these guys are. I think all these guys have a lot of playoff points that you probably didn't expect, because you see a guy like Larson up there, 39 to good, Christopher Bell, Tyler Reddick, but from William Byron being only 14 in all the way back, it's super close. And I'm good friends with the engineer on the 24, and I was talking to him. I was like, oh, how good are you now that the reset? He's like, oh, we're only 14 in. I'm like, you won 3 races and some stages. You should have way more, but there's so many bonus points, including Joey, who got more bonus points in the last round, which is what's changed some of the shakeup now.
Yeah, the one thing when looking at this is interesting is we have a road course in this round. We have another super speedway in this round. And then we have a 1.5 miles, one of the smoothest 1.5 miles we go to, that a lot of these guys up towards the front dominate at. You know, the Denny Hamlins, the Kyle Larson, won in the spring. Those guys run really well there. So it's a chance for them to separate themselves more, hopefully, for their sake, until you come to Talladega, and then you go to Charlotte for the Roval. Places where I am positive Alex Bowman runs great at. Daniel Suarez is a good road racer. Austin Cindric is a great road racer. Those guys are looking forward to the Roval, and maybe Kansas is the other side of the board, so hoping they can separate that gap a little more.
Yeah, like you said, we just joked ending the chaos round, but honestly, it's just the chaos round in reverse. We got a very boring race that was dominated by a great driver at Bristol.
Yeah.
You're probably going to see that at Kansas. That's what's happened all year long.
Yep.
And instead, these guys who had their huge first 2 races of the last round and kind of got, oh, wow, I'm in a great spot. Now they have to wait a couple weeks to get there, and the guys on the left side of the board can hopefully pad their lead so they can go into the next 2 and not be so stressed.
One thing that's happened in the history of Kansas is the first race, fairly calm. The second race, there's a lot of accidents that happen at Kansas that can take you out of contention. You'll be 3, 4, 5 wide on restarts trying to jockey for position, and a lot of these guys could end up in a mess, not of their doing, and really put themselves in hurt going to Talladega next week.
So we kind of joked about this before, but do you think the start-finish line is going to be straight? You think that'll have any impact on the end of this next one at Kansas?
Yes, the Kansas in the spring, for all the fans that don't remember, it was the closest finish in NASCAR history between Chris Buescher, who thought he won the race, team celebrating on pit road. Everybody by the eye as they crossed thought the 17 probably won until they slowed it down and really looked and saw the 5 beating by the narrowest of margins. You had to go to the photo finish to see Kyle Larson just squeak by.
The round of 12 is really close, like we just have broke down. There's a couple guys that are at this moment potentially locks, but they also, Larson wrecked in the first or 2 laps of the last round, so who knows if those 39 points are going to last or not. It's going to be pretty exciting to watch what these guys can do.
Kansas is a great racetrack. Drivers will be ripping the wall, they'll be running the white line, they'll be all over the place. It taxes every aspect of your race team, from horsepower to downforce to your pit crew to strategy, and you won't want to miss it. Live Sunday at 3 p.m. on USA.